We've got Michigan State at the shoe as a 19-point underdog, one of the top 5, 6, 7 teams in the country. That's just astounding to me, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Buckeyes covered. I don't think they will. It's probably going to be my pick on Patreon, folks. $5 a month. So anyway, Tony, we've got a long history of Michigan State jumping up and bringing down great Ohio State teams. 1973, 98, 13, 15. I missed one in there somewhere. And here we go. Michigan State's playing for a championship itself, so it's not all about Ohio State. How do you see this matchup?
19 seems like a lot as well, and it seemed like a lot last week, and we saw how that went. Hearing some people talking from inside Michigan State where they feel like Ohio State might be able to do what they want in this one, and so that starts to make you think Ohio State's going to be able to throw the ball pretty well, depending on the weather. We'll see what it is on Saturday. I don't know what it's supposed to be right now, but this is if you contain Kenneth Walker, can Peyton Thorne beat you? He has good receivers, and he can beat you, but will he? Will the accuracy be there, or will he be a 55% thrower that day rather than a 70% thrower? And you just don't know. I think the one constant that you do know is that Ohio State will be able to move the ball, will be able to score, and then it always comes back to how many points would Ohio State have to give up to lose. Last week they gave up 31, and it was never in doubt. And would 31 put a scare into Ohio State this week? More so than last week, I think, but I still think 31 probably still looking at like a 45-31, and I'm not sure Michigan State scores 31. I think Ohio State's run defense is one of the best rush defenses in the nation. They've shown that. Purdue was able to run the ball a little bit on them, but that's because they were dropping 3 or dropping 8 and just allowing Purdue to, sure, if you want to run the ball, go ahead. Michigan State's going to try to do it. Ohio State's going to have to stop them. And if Ohio State can't control the line of scrimmage, then you've got a problem. But even then, is it, Ohio State 38-34? Like, I feel like Ohio State's offense will be able to overcome what the defense does. It's going to be a fun one. But I'm thinking probably a couple touchdowns in Ohio State's favor rather than, fourth quarter final drive type of game.
Yeah, I'm conflicted just as well. On one hand, Ohio State takes care of business at Ohio Stadium typically. Other than the Oregon game, you have to go back a long way to when somebody played them real tight at Ohio Stadium. It doesn't happen very often. And on the other hand, on the same hand, I look at Michigan State's pass defense. They gave up 500 yards to Purdue. C.J. Stroud's already got 400-yard games, and he's got an array of wide receivers to throw the ball to. And so, to my way of thinking, Ohio State could very well throw for 400 yards in this game and probably rush for 150 or 200 yards as well. So they could really put it on Michigan State if they get off to a fast start and get everything going and find a way to contain Walker in the run game. I think Michigan State, conversely, is going to attack Ohio State's pass defense, which has been suspect the last couple of weeks with Peyton Thorne. He's got Naylor and Reed, some pretty good wide receivers out there. And Walker, Ohio State's done really well against the run on the whole. We'll see if Ohio State can contain Walker in the running game. He had 197 yards and 5 touchdowns against Michigan in that win by Michigan State. So that was a command performance by him. So I am conflicted on this. I probably think it's something in the 41-24 range, something like that, just as a first thought. But, I could be persuaded either way. To sit here and say I would put my house on the plus 19 or the minus 19, I don't think I would. This is not a game where I'm sitting here saying I got to absolutely load up on this side or the other. I would say predominantly if it was number 4 against number 7, you'd think it wouldn't be a blowout, but it very well could be. I mean, if Ohio State's hitting on all cylinders like they were this past week, and there's no reason why to think Purdue's going to slow them down, because I've watched some videotapes, and what's crazy is that quarterbacks will hold the ball for 5, 6, 7 seconds, and then some guy will make a sliding catch 30 yards downfield, and you're like, my God, how did that happen? Oh, it's Michigan State secondary. They're not very good. So, yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired. I'll just say that.
Yeah, if I'm loading up on anything, it's the over. I mean, I think that this is going to be a high-scoring game. I really do. And then again, we sit there and we're like, oh, it's going to be a high-scoring game. It ends up being, 17-16. Oh, it's going to be a low-scoring game. It ends up being 42-39. We've seen how those things work. But, I like Ohio State probably to get into the 50s, honestly, because I have no faith in that Michigan State secondary. And I think that they're going to be able to run the ball. I look at, Maryland ran for 101, Purdue ran for 58, Michigan only ran for 146, but, then Michigan ends up throwing for 406 in that game. I like Ohio State's chances to really push this defense, but I think that Michigan State's going to score a lot more points than people are saying. I heard somebody throw 31 in here. I think 31 sounds like about a right number. I think it could be something like 52-31, to be quite honest. I know I bang this drum every single week in Tale of the Tape about how Ohio State is a balanced offense, 196 yards, 197 yards rushing, over 350 passing, which of course, that's not super balanced, but when it's 30th rushing offense and sixth passing offense, that's very different than when Michigan comes in with the 77th passing offense and the 13th rushing offense, or when you look here in Nebraska, Nebraska is about the closest thing that they play to a balanced offense. So I think that Ohio State's going to be able to do a lot of things to take Michigan State out of its game. I think the X factor that's going to determine if it's going to be 31 points or it's going to be 14 points for Sparty is going to be what Ohio State does against Kenneth Walker.
So with Nebraska, you mean balanced offense, meaning marginal running and marginal passing?
That's still balanced.
Okay. So, Tony, if you're looking at a box score, if we can show you just a couple lines from a box score after this game, what are you looking for?
Kenneth Walker's total yards, total rushing yards, and maybe the same with Travion Henderson. It might be one of those things where whoever outrushes the other, that would give you a pretty good idea. But because, we've seen CJ Stroud throw for 400 yards in a loss already, and we've seen Dwayne Haskins do that. So, passing yards doesn't necessarily measure wins. It can also be a signature of desperation. So I think it's, give me the yards per carry of Kenneth Walker and Travion Henderson. And if Travion Henderson is 3 yards more per carry than Kenneth Walker, I like the Buckeyes' chances quite a bit. And like Kevin said, the passing game is going to happen whether or not Michigan State likes it. So, that is what it is, but it's going to be about converting down in the red zone and making those tough yards. And that's where Mayan Williams also gets involved.
What are your most telling stat lines, Kevin?
I'm going to be looking at Michigan State's third down conversion percentage, because Michigan State is converting about 38% of the time. They're 76th in the nation. If Michigan State goes closer to 50%, we're going to be in for much more of a game than anticipated. I'm also looking at Michigan State's red zone offense and defense. Neither of them are particularly fantastic, both in the 60s nationally, which is right in about the middle in terms of having 130 FBS teams. Those are, I know that it would be a lot easier to just be able to extrapolate off of, this guy ran for this or this guy threw for this. But I think some of those numbers there are going to be important. And then I also am going to be curious about Ohio State's penalties. Ohio State's been Ohio State's own worst enemy at times, having drives get cut short because of procedural calls. If Ohio State can play a clean game, I like Ohio State's chances to win this one pretty big.
And maybe if you see Kenneth Walker's line and it's impressive from a yardage per carry standpoint, but it's only 13 to 16 carries, maybe he ripped off a couple nice runs and Michigan State was in it at 14 all, but then it suddenly became 38-14 and he was taken out of the game and he went 13 carries for 112, but it was ineffective after halftime, versus if he gets 32 for 187, then those 32 carries may chew up a lot of time and keep CJ Stroud on the sideline.
Yeah, even if it's 32 for like 140, like just the fact that you've had the ball that you're able to convert those, as Kevin said, the third downs, because you're not carrying the ball 32 times without converting some third downs. So yeah, that's another key stat. Just how many times do they actually give the ball to Kenneth Walker? Because if it's 13, that's bad. If it's 30, that may not be enough to win, but it tells you that Michigan State is at least controlling a little bit of the clock, a little bit of the line of scrimmage. But also, again, it may only lead to 24 points at that point.
And much like Michigan or Ohio State, Michigan State doesn't really put out a too deep. So not sure what their health is, but if they don't have Jalen Naylor, I think at receiver, I think that's going to be a big hit. They didn't have their starting left tackle last week against Maryland. And also they went and got one of the biggest players out of the transfer portal from Tennessee, that linebacker Crouch, and he didn't play either. So if they are down a couple of guys, things can get really dicey really fast.
Yeah. Also missing a defensive tackle and a corner, and I think their kicker was also out as well. And he's of course not. Tucker's not going to talk about who will or won't be here. I just looked in an article and he said he told his team, if you can play, please play. Essentially, like if you can go, let's go this week.
We're begging you.
Mm-hmm. And if you can't, you can't.
Yakov's super chat contribution, thank you so much for that, has spurred on some debate in the live chat concerning best Big Ten quarterback. Purdue's Aiden O'Connell better than Peyton Thorne and Cade McNamara. David Greenshield was asking us for the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he's making an assumption there that CJ Stroud is number one. Tony, do you find it difficult evaluating CJ Stroud against some of these other quarterbacks that you've faced, just because, like, I'll take Cade McNamara's best game. He played lights out against Michigan State. Like, he was making ridiculous throws, NFL kind of throws, anticipating tight windows, the whole deal. CJ Stroud just seems to be throwing to guys that are wide open all the time.
Well, and it is interesting. Although I will remind you that Cade McNamara threw the game-clinching interception against Michigan State as well on a great play.
He got duped. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, could Cade McNamara be doing what CJ Stroud is doing at Ohio State? I think they would ask different things of him. I don't think they can ask everything they ask of CJ Stroud. The downfield stuff, Michigan doesn't ask much of that. Just charting some of his passing over the course of the last month. I mean, he had 1 week where his 20 completions traveled a total of 20 yards downfield before, like that's, an average of 1 yard downfield per throw. And that's not going to be anything that CJ Stroud or Ohio State will do over the course of the game. They have their jet sweeps. Ohio State does, and any quarterback can do that, of course. I think the thing that I like about CJ Stroud more than anybody else in the Big Ten is his consistency. And we can see moments of greatness from pretty much many of the other starting quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Taulia Tagovailoa, Aiden O'Connell, Sean Clifford, even Adrian Martinez at times. Peyton Thorne has had some good games. Cade McNamara, you mentioned, throw for 400 yards. But they can't do it week after week after week. And at some point there's going to be just like a downfall, a bad game. I'm looking, Aiden O'Connell against Wisconsin completed, 75% of his passes, but just for 200 yards, threw 3 interceptions and 1 touchdown in that 30-13 loss. So, like, he's had some really good moments, but just the consistency. Even when CJ Stroud lost, he threw for 480 some yards. So, like, he was able to do some stuff. And it's not all open receivers, obviously, but yes, he does have more open receivers than anybody else. But he's also putting in a position for those open receivers to do something with the ball, or just, he's hitting them. Credit him for that. Please, Mark, give CJ Stroud some credit for something.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out a stat here, and I've got it. I just have to. McNamara didn't throw all the passing yardage in that game against Michigan State. Where's that? He's got 1883. So 20.3% of all of Cade McNamara's passing yardage came in that one game for this season. So 1/5, a little bit more than 1/5 of his passing yardage came in that one game. Now, I don't want to. I'm not going to sit there and short him and say, oh well, that's just an outlier. But you look at McNamara's numbers. I mean, yeah, he has 2 interceptions, but he only has 237 pass attempts, whereas C.J. Stroud has 311. Peyton Thorne has 273. I mean, he's significantly down the chart on everybody. McNamara is less than a 63% passer. Peyton Thorne is a 63.4% passer. CJ Stroud is 68.8. And, going back to the Super Chat question, Aiden O'Connell is 72.4%. Now, his touchdown to interception ratio is not great at 2-1, 16-8. But, he's slinging it around. He's got a pretty decent efficiency rating. But, who is the second best quarterback in the Big Ten? I don't know. Maryland's guy certainly looks good at throwing for 310 and a half. Granted, he's 2-1 touchdowns to interceptions. O'Connell, we already talked about. Clifford, 17 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, but he's throwing sub 63%. So I don't know. I mean, I just think that sometimes it's just a matter of what the offense looks like. And Maryland's got a very pass-friendly offense. Obviously, Purdue is only passing. But, I wouldn't go too far off of Yakov's statement that Aiden O'Connell, in terms of just being a pure quarterback, might be the second best quarterback in the conference.
If the Big Ten coaches were able to draft quarterbacks, any Big Ten quarterback, if CJ Stroud is number 1, how far down the list is Kyle McCord? Where does he go in that list? Because I think we know Kyle McCord could do some big things at Ohio State and would be doing some big things right now. If he had won the job, then he'd be putting up these numbers. Just, we're not even talking about him, but I'm sure any coach would take him. Now, would they take him over Aiden O'Connell, or even, JJ McCarthy would be another guy that might be higher than some of these starters. But in terms of Cade McNamara, this past week, he was 19 of 29 passing, but only, 5 of 12 on passes more than 5 yards downfield. That's not far. So there's some things there that I think, been talking about this on podcasts as well. When Ohio State and Michigan play, Ohio State's vulnerable a little bit further down the field than 5 yards. Like, throw the ball a little bit, throw the ball over the linebackers in front of the safeties. That's where they're vulnerable. Can Cade McNamara do that? He can sometimes, but he's more comfortable throwing it closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think that suits Ohio State's defense a little bit better.
Well, it might take Eric all 20 minutes to run that long route. So, and we've determined that might be their best pass catcher.
As long as the defenders run into each other on that mesh route, it's unstoppable.